clinically proven you can speed up recovery by 46% by doing like down regulating breathing. So
Adam, welcome to the podcast.
thanks for having me.
A mutual friend introduced us and he mentioned what you were working on. I saw the title of your platform, the name, FivePointFive. What does that refer to and why is that significant?
Yeah, so FivePointFive, I actually discovered it whilst reading the book Breathe by James Nestor, and he basically talks about the optimal breath for a human being somewhere between 4.5 seconds in, 4.5 seconds out, and 6.5 seconds in, 6.5 seconds out. And obviously averaging out to 5.5 seconds. But there's more to it than that, because it's also 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out, but also 5.5 breaths per minute and 5.5 liters of air. So there's this magic number of 5.5 has been floating around for a long time. That being said, that's an average, right? So some people's optimal breath will be 4.5 and some people maybe 6 or 6.5, but it's kind of the magic number for optimal breathing for a human.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so when you hit your what's called resonant frequency breath rate, what happens? What's going on inside your body that makes it a magic number?
Yeah, so I think from a physiological standpoint, obviously certain breathing techniques have different reactions for different people. But when you look at the key metric that you find when you hit that sweet spot is HRV. That's kind of a really key indicator that you're getting that resonant breathing pattern that is right for you. That being said, that also changes over time, right? So we know that, if you're training for a marathon or you're going to train in a certain way, your breath patterns also evolve. So it's incredibly important from a biometric standpoint that whatever tool people are using, which is why we've got biometrics in the app that we have, is to really measure not just where you are today, but also how you're evolving over time and ensuring that that ultimate breath pattern from balancing out your nervous system is working as it should. And that obviously has a whole host of benefits that I'm sure we'll talk about in a lot of detail in this podcast.
Yeah. So if I figured out my resonant frequency breath rate right now is, say, average of 5.5 or 4 in, 6 out, and that changes over time, what do I do with that information? Like, how do I use that to actually make a change? And how do I know if it's a good change or a bad change?
So I think there's core biomarkers that everyone will monitor. From our perspective, from an athletic perspective, a lot of people are focused on VO2 max and HRV. There is obviously a benchmark, so not everyone has the same levels of these biomarkers. So over time, you'll start to compare against your own benchmark. So if you're having kind of apps, be that Whoop or a Fitbit, Garmin, the benchmark is obviously incredibly important because it's obviously telling you where you were at and how you're doing compared to that. And what we also find is, people do try and compare each other, and it's just a dangerous game because, we're all different. But you will start to see so many different effects as you kind of evolve on that journey. So let's take, for example, HRV, that obviously has multiple benefits from a body perspective, a mind perspective, a sleep perspective. So you can start to measure the sub metrics from all those when you start to go into measuring deep sleep versus REM versus other forms of sleep. So wherever you're starting, you can go deeper and deeper and get kind of a better understanding of how much data you want. And I think these wearables that exist, they're not short of data, right? You can go into a real rabbit hole. And some people just like the top line data and they'll focus on HRV, VO2 max, and some people really want to get under the hood. So if you're looking at HRV, there are multiple data points that fall under HRV. Where we often look at RMSSD, which is a really good indicator from a mind perspective, what's going on, SDNN, which also is used for a mind and body perspective. So these sub-biomarkers, which a lot of wearables give you, but maybe the frequency isn't as often as it should be. That's really insightful if you want to get a level deeper as well into some of those metrics.
Interesting. There's also one called, I think it's the coefficient of variance of HRV, which is more resistant to like heart rate changes, because I think it's as your heart rate increases, your HRV also increases. And so there's more research around the CV of HRV, as it's abbreviated, for performance and other things. Maybe you've seen that.
Yeah, well, there's multiple types of HRV, right? So there's the short-term HRV, long-term HRV, standard HRV. And, if you've gone for a run and you see your HRV, it's not going to look like what it's going to look in the morning. But actually, when you look at the following morning, that's actually when you're seeing the benefits of it. So it's, again, knowing kind of your routine, knowing how you're working out, and knowing when you're looking at them. and not expecting kind of like to see certain results after a certain activity is one thing, but understanding which level of HRV you're actually looking at is another thing.
Because HRV is also one of those metrics where it can be really helpful. And I've been talking a lot about nervous system regulation on the podcast, and it's really like the core of like behavior change and of health. If you have a dysregulated nervous system, things that are, quote, otherwise healthy are going to actually not work in your favor. They can work against you. And so knowing your nervous system status is great. But then if you're working out frequently, you might notice your HRV declines. And it's really about like the bigger picture rather than just like a 24-hour cycle. Is it high today, low tomorrow? It's like that'll fluctuate a lot depending on like what you're doing. So it's like understanding the trends, and like you don't want to see your HRV constantly low because you're working out super hard. That might also be a negative thing, like sign. So you want to see like a good.
And that's why we actually brought heart rate monitoring in the app as well, because that's a really good sign of where you're leveling out from your nervous system perspective in that actual session live, versus just trying to kind of give you kind of live HRV, which obviously, as you say, it becomes meaningless and can be distracting, right? But if you have a deeper level on heart rate, you can start to understand, where you're at in terms of, the activation of your parasympathetic versus obviously kind of other forms. And, this kind of like sympathetic versus parasympathetic is a really good gauge to understand, where you're actually at from a future HRV perspective as well. So, heart rate is obviously an indicator for future HRV as well. So if you can really understand your heart rate better, you can also start to understand, some of the other benefits you'll get from building your HRV over time and, increasing your benchmark as well.
Do you think people are aware, like consciously aware, okay, I'm feeling more stress right now and therefore I probably have a lower HRV? Or is it one of those things where it's like it kind of flies under the radar unless you're specifically trained on how to spot signs of low HRV?
Good question. I'm biased, right? Because I'm so aware of like breathing and the effects it has in any moment. So for me personally, I can only speak for me personally, but I'm very aware of what's happening from a heart rate perspective, be that working out or chilling out, and using obviously 5.5 as a tool to make sure it puts me into kind of a better state, which obviously overall will kind of help HRV in the long term. So I'm biased, it's hard to say, but what I do know is clearly there is so much more education out there, and this is where the wearables have done such a great job to really give people as much data as they want, and also to really simplify that data. So obviously you look at recovery scores or whatever you're measuring, that's really informative to people because it gets rid of the jargon and that just understands, exactly where you're at any moment in time. And that's super valuable versus, let's face it, right? Most people don't even know what HRV is. So if you just threw that up on the screen, you're going to put a lot of people off. So, I think the accessibility now and how to kind of comprehend that simply is a really good thing. And then people can really kind of go in their paths and understand more about, in those moments, what's happening and how is the HRV being affected. So to answer your question, there's definitely this heightened awareness, but it's of a certain type of audience who are more wearable focused, more tracking their everyday life. When they wake up in the morning, they check their sleep at night to see how they've done. When they've done a workout, they check their stats to see how they performed. And they are obviously kind of very clued up on all this because of the data that's available now.
Well, with your platform, that makes me wonder, have you seen any trends? Because since you're aggregating data, are you seeing that like people increase their HRV by 10% on average after a session, or they lower their resting heart rate or anything? Like, of course, it's going to differ depending on the type of breath work they're doing specifically. But are there any things like when they do restorative breath work that you're seeing this or that effect?
We see, so what we kind of use our data to kind of inform our audience on how much to do and how often. So we see a direct effect on HRV and other markers when people are doing things frequently. So we recommend 5 times a week for 5 minutes, a day. And that's where we've really kind of seen like a good effect. So we obviously push towards that because we want everyone to get the most out of it. In terms of other metrics, so the way that it works for us is in the app, we also have tried to simplify it for our audience. So we have a mind, body, and sleep score. So the whole point is, when you have a wearable and they tell you HRV has gone down, you don't know why and you don't know what to do about it. So in our app, where you kind of come in, you'll see your sleep score's gone down, or your mind score's gone down, or your body score's gone down. But these are mind classes you can do to get that back up, body classes you can do to get that back up, sleep classes to get that back up. And so we want to make sure we're obviously tailoring our recommendations of what you should be doing based off those scores in our app as well.
Yeah, it'd be cool to see for each of the different goals. Like, okay, here's where you started, your average sleep score, your average recovery score, whatever it is. And then after 2 weeks of 5 minutes, five times per week for 5 minutes a session, here's where you are now. And so you can actually see like, okay, this is what impact it has. Because otherwise it's like, I think it made me feel better, less stressed, more concentrated, but I'm not sure. It could be placebo.
Yeah, 100%. And this is why wellness in general shouldn't just be a feeling anymore, right? We're past that. We should be getting data. We should understand what effect did that actually have on me, and versus this other breath work or something I did, what effect did that have on me? Let's measure it, let's compare, and then see what the best kind of route is forward for every individual. Because again, we all have different lung capacity, different environments, different breathing styles, different pressures, different stresses, different lives, and so it's not a one size fits all. And that's where for us, we see the whole industry moving to hyper personalization. How can you ensure in any moment in time you are doing the optimal breath for you in that moment? And that's something that obviously where the biometrics kind of coming through is incredibly valuable for us, because then we can tailor our content to ensure that you are doing the best and most impactful class at any moment.
So what devices do you guys currently support? Because I primarily rely on an ultra human ring, and I don't think you support ultra human yet. And
yes, so there's two parts of that. So you've got our heart rate tracker, which is like live in our app, and that also gives you AI coach feedback, and that's integratable with all wearables that have Bluetooth or Apple Watch. The only major one we don't work with is Aura right now. From a mind, body, and sleep score, that's slightly different. That's the kind of a beta feature that we've got in the app at the moment. That's only integrating with the Apple Watch right now, whilst we're in beta, but we're obviously going to be building that out. But we are working on some really exciting features that allow. Look, we found that a lot of our users were, they were doing sessions, they were going into, their apps that were kind of tracking and trying to kind of piece it all together. And we just want to kind of make sure that's seamless, right? So you can see this is what we did, this is the effect it had, and that we want to do for all wearables. To be honest, some wearables are harder to work with than others. So we are kind of at the mercy of some of the conversations that we're having in terms of partnerships. But a lot of them now kind of make kind of integrations more accessible. So hence why we can kind of work with a lot of them on kind of a Bluetooth basis when it comes to heart rate tracking.
Nice. Well, I didn't realize that part, so I'm gonna have to go in and try setting that up myself
to
see how it works.
I should have told you to check that out.
A minute ago, you were mentioning the role of breathing on different facets of performance. One of those being a very hot topic these days called VO2 max. Will you break down what VO2 max is and if breath work can have any impact on it?
Yes. Yeah. So VO2 max, it's the max amount of oxygen you can utilize when you're doing a high performing task. That could be, running or really kind of stressing your body. We find that from a VO2 max perspective, there's certain types of breathwork techniques that have been clinically proven to have a better effect than others. That being said, we also are aware that this kind of VO2 max is kind of quite well-rounded from mind, body, and sleep perspective. But if you look at the studies, what we kind of have found, and it's if you look at athletes to start, we find that when you have athletes that are training for a tournament, what do? They go to high altitude training camps. Why? Because there's less oxygen in the air. And what happens in that moment is they're training to build up their carbon dioxide tolerance, which basically helps with red blood cell production and transportation of oxygen around the body through hemoglobin. Now, that's a really important thing that they're getting there because they're training their body to do more with less. So when they come down to, call it kind of a fair altitude, they're going to have a lot more available to them to work with because their body is just used to kind of producing more to kind of help them. So a lot of the stuff that kind of we're seeing from VO2 max perspective is some of this carbon dioxide tolerance training. Now, that is replicable without having to go to Kenya and training at high altitude. So that is, a lot of like nose breathing techniques when you're doing kind of a high intensity classes or breath holding, a certain type of breath holding when you're doing high intensity. So you can train that and simulate that at kind of your gym on a treadmill or when you're just going for a run. We also find that a lot of kind of VO2 max comes from how well your body is utilizing oxygen, and that comes down to how well your body is kind of working to kind of, from breathing muscle perspective, to push more easier oxygen transportation of oxygen around your body. So a lot of the stuff we do is also kind of diaphragm activation, because that's your core breathing muscle. So if you've got a really good diaphragm activation, we'll also see a direct correlation in VO2 max. Then you've got another side of it as well, which is around lung capacity. So there's a lot of exercises that we do in the app as well, which is building your lung capacity. So you can essentially have kind of bigger breaths, and there's these tiny air sacs called alveoli in your lungs. And when you're kind of doing full breaths in, full breaths out, you're waking up that. So you're utilizing more of that lung capacity as well. But on the other side, you can also physically grow your lung capacity when you're doing these exercises, which is why, you have free divers that do a lot of these types of exercises, for example. So when you kind of combine all that together, you start to see kind of some of the tricks to kind of getting, VO2 max in a certain direction. And that obviously comes with the other side of it, which is, are you sleeping well? Are you getting good restorative sleep? And all these different aspects, which obviously have kind of contributions. But when you look at a pilot study that was done by Patrick McKeown, who is our lead advisor and one of the top functional breathwork experts in the world, they saw that and this is with actual athletes, they saw a 8 to 11% increase in VO2 max in a 4 to 6 week period when doing these types of exercises. So we've tried to package it all up, put that in the app, and obviously give that to the masses for your everyday athletes as well.
That's significant from only doing this, like not even increasing training load or doing like typical VO2 max style training.
Yes, so they stack it on top of their existing athletic routine.
Are there any diagnostics people can do at home to figure out, okay, what is my lung capacity? Perhaps how easy is a 30-second breath hold or 1 minute breath hold? Or then also on the other side, to gauge the function and health and strength of the diaphragm?
Yeah, good question. So there's something called the Bolt score test. It has its limitations, but it's a body oxygen level test. And essentially, it is allowing you to benchmark yourself as to where you're at on a certain scale. So the idea is that you breathe in, breathe out normally, and on the exhale, you hold your breath, and you count the seconds to the first kind of activation of the diaphragm, when you first feel that kind of a diaphragm contracting, the urge to breathe. But you can't push yourself, otherwise you're kind of cheating. So there is, and that's why it has its flaws, right? Because people push themselves. And you shouldn't. So that you can do your breath work and do your exercise routines, and then use that as kind of some kind of metric on that side. What's
a good score there? So if you exhale all the way, then you hold your breath, you get that really uncomfortable urge to breathe. What kind of time elapse should there be between the exhale and the first urge that's considered good, and then also will be considered great?
If you are at the kind of 40 plus, you're in a good spot in general.
Okay.
And again, it's really important that you don't, it's not like you take a big breath in, a big breath out, because obviously that is kind of manipulating the process as well. It's just having a couple of like easy breaths in, easy breaths out, as you would breathe normally, and then doing it. And that's how you kind of get kind of a good, or should I say a true score. So that's really helpful. And then, sorry, the second part of your question, what was?
Well, first on that, it's like the purpose of this isn't to compare scores with friends necessarily. It's to get a baseline, then to implement some kind of practice that you're seeking to improve your score, and then remeasuring it. And if you cheat, and if you go way past the first urge to breathe, you're just like only really cheating yourself. So it doesn't really make any sense to do that, even though it can be tempting. And then the second part of that's the diaphragm. Then also the like lung capacity.
Yeah, so you mentioned about the specific diaphragm as well. And it's really hard to even know if people are utilizing their diaphragm, because your diaphragm is like hidden under part of your rib cage, right? So a lot of people think when they're belly breathing, that's how they should be breathing. But the best way that I've kind of found to really see if you're activating your diaphragm effectively is having your hands on the bottom and sides of your ribs, and then ensuring that your ribs are kind of going outwards rather than like, as in outwards to the side, like filling up your hands on the side versus trying to kind of fill up your belly. Now there is quite a lot of exercises you can do, but what you find people like, Steph Curry and people do is straight away when they've done a workout, they'll lay down flat and they'll put a weight on their diaphragm. And that basically allows you to start training your diaphragm because you're kind of waking it up to make sure you're moving that weight. And at the same time, it's also kind of activating, your parasympathetic by, allowing you to kind of slow down at that moment. So that's kind of something that, I've kind of utilized before as well. And you see a lot of athletes do, just to ensure that they're forcing their diaphragm to be activated.
I've also read in some research that women have a greater cortisol response than men from training and stressors, and it takes them longer to metabolize, to break down cortisol. And so it seems to me that like post-workout, of course, it's beneficial for everyone to bring your stress hormones back down, but this kind of thing would be especially beneficial for women for that reason.
Yeah, so I can't say it's an area that I've studied, but there is this correlation also with menstrual cycles and how females will be breathing at any kind of certain instance, and menopause as well. That does affect kind of breathing and the type of breath work that you should do. So unfortunately, females do have a lot more nuances involved when it comes to breathing and certain kind of hormones that are activated, such as cortisol. So yeah, it's not something that, I'm kind of over familiar with, but what we are trying to do is really understand the nuances from a biometric perspective when it comes to females versus males. So that, again, everyone as an individual can ensure they're doing the breath work that's right for them, because, especially if that changes over a month period as well,
Are you finding that athletes, when they use your platform, tend to gravitate towards the energizing, performance, sympathetic activating types of training styles, where it tends to be longer inhales, shorter exhales, versus the calming restorative practices, which are shorter inhales and longer exhales?
It's a bit of both. So you've got two parts of it. You've got your pre-workout, which is, your carbon dioxide tolerance training. So that's kind of very big for the athletes in our platform. But the other side is recovery. So, every athlete should be kind of doing certain breathing techniques to recover faster, right? And clinically proven you can speed up recovery by 46% by doing like down-regulating breathing. So for those that are less familiar, down-regulating would be just slower breathing or exhaling for longer than you're inhaling. So that's kind of a really important factor that people do if they are kind of, I actually just listened to an interview. We interview our customers on a daily basis. And one of the interviews we just listened to before this call was, he was actually the number one triathlete in the US for his age group last year. And, he mainly uses the app for recovery. He does kind of his ice baths and saunas, and then he kind of uses the breath work. So that specifically he finds kind of really helpful for him. But, others kind of, we see a kind of a real mix of everything. And I think when you're at that level as well, and you're a professional athlete, you are a lot more in touch of what you need at any moment. So yes, they kind of are, kind of habit stacking very effectively. But they also are aware of when they need kind of a certain type of breathwork technique, such as, being more focused. Let's say they're doing something competitive, or let's say they're just not in the right frame of mind, then they might do a mind class to be more focused in order to get the best out of their performance as well. So yeah, they have that awareness, which obviously not everyone has, but is helpful. So I'd say kind of the main things that they're using is the performance builders, which is the carbon dioxide tolerance, as well as kind of recovery classes, which we call cool downs. At the same time, they take their sleep very seriously. So, that they know that to have certain types of sleep is good for, restorative sleep and ensuring that they can push hard the following day. So we do see a lot of kind of sleep going hand in hand with those performance builders, because they're aware of when they're working out and when they need to downregulate and when they need to get more restorative sleep.
Yeah, I mean, all the restoration occurs during sleep or a very deep meditation, but aside from those two times, there's not much restoration that goes on during the day. And even then, athletes that are professionals tend to prioritize recovery way above what most people would think they do. The general consensus or the misperception is that athletes just train harder and they push themselves harder, and that's why they're so much more successful. And there's definitely an element of, yes, they work hard, but then also the dedication they put into recovery is one of the things that really sets them apart from the rest of the population.
100%. I actually think recovery is going to be the theme of 2025, like for the remainder of 2025. I've seen this really come up a lot. And we are seeing this more and more where people just really want that recovery tool. And there is this direct correlation that, they've done the maths, right? They've seen the data. When you have kind of a certain level of recovery, or when you speed up your recovery, your performance is better, right? So the faster you can speed up your recovery, then obviously HRV also benefits as well, and all the other kind of metrics that are important to them. So yeah, that is a really crucial point. I'm pleased you mentioned it, because it is a trend that we're seeing go pretty quickly in that direction.
Yeah, and that was part of my foray into this world of performance. It's like I realized that I was pushing myself harder, and the harder I pushed myself just to maintain, the more I would need to focus on recovery and build up my recovery. And if I actually really focus on recovery, then I'd have more reserves for the times that I need them. And if I'd need a recovery from an injury or just from a really grueling workout, I'm not going to be putting myself in harm's way.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree.
So you mentioned CO2 tolerance several times. What is the role of carbon dioxide in all of this? I think people have heard it as described as an evil gas or a waste product. Why would you want to work on tolerance of it?
So it's really interesting, because if you ask someone the reason why do they breathe, they'll say we need more oxygen, and it's actually not true, right? So the urge to breathe comes from your carbon dioxide tolerance. Our cells have 97, 98% oxygen in them, even if you've done exercise. That's not changing much. So the urge to breathe comes from your carbon dioxide tolerance. So really important that if we kind of train that, certain breath holding techniques and other forms, it really helps you ensure that your resting heart rate can decrease. You can kind of start to get all the benefits that you get from just breathing slower. And towards that, 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out in everyday life, which is obviously near on impossible, but it's just good to ensure that we are slowing our breaths in everyday lives. So yeah, there is this kind of view of carbon dioxide, nitric oxide as well. It had the same view, but these are very powerful things, that are incredibly important for performance specifically, that people do need to understand a bit better in order to make sure that, they are, being attracted by, the right words rather than kind of put off by the wrong words.
Yeah. There's actually a whole trend around carbon dioxide these days. At the recent biohacking conference I was at, there was a company at the Health Optimization Summit here in Austin also that has a carbon dioxide therapy system where you actually inhale, I think it's about 2 to 6 or 7% carbon dioxide, normal air enriched with that. And it's another way of training carbon dioxide tolerance. And when you do that, you get vasodilation and you get a lot of different benefits that help with training, and MMA and martial artists use this kind of therapy to enhance their performance. Even though it's not widely recognized yet, there's some interesting data around the long-term effect of increasing carbon dioxide tolerance.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And, I think this is the same with, altitude training of kind of, wearing masks when you're running and all these things, and altitude chambers that a lot of people use. It's all kind of very similar in kind of, the effects that you're getting. I think, the question is, can you benefit more from those than kind of just holding your breath for longer, for example? I don't know enough about it, but you're obviously kind of, the carbon dioxide tolerance will be getting to a certain point, whether or not you're kind of using certain tools or not, but how much can you push that is obviously important. There is obviously this other side, which is, people do push too hard, and that's also could be quite dangerous. So, you literally have Olympians that faint, right? When they kind of really push too hard. And so really important that if you are doing these types of exercises, you're aware, you're guided, be that kind of from coaches or again, using an app like ours, to ensure that you're not pushing too hard, that, you're getting to that level of comfort. And I think people will be surprised as well that you can build this really quickly. Really quickly. I do 5 minutes every morning. And, I would say I'm probably fitter than most of my friends that run for 30 to 60 minutes, 3-4 times a week. So you can build it really quickly. And, so don't just rush to try and get there, but you'll see, just like any, muscle building, you see gains pretty quickly. So yeah, just something to be aware of when people do start for the first time.
And to build this ability specifically, it comes down to like doing a breathwork practice that you get to the edge of the air hunger where it's like feel the need to breathe.
Yeah, and we say like moderate, moderate air hunger, because you bear in mind there's many factors that will distinguish how fast you're building up. Like, how fast are you going? Are you walking up a hill? And all these types of things you need to consider. So it's not, you have to use your own judgment as well, because you know your body, versus trying to be led by, a kind of where you're at and what environment you're in that moment.
Yeah, you're not going to get this from just doing like a really simple, let's say 4-4 box breathing, where you're inhaling for 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4. You have to actually like push yourself a little to where it gets uncomfortable.
Yeah, that being said, like, we do have those types of techniques in like these types of classes as well, which is also really hard, because if you think you're breathing in for 4 in that example and not breathing, for 8, 12. So that is still a good ratio of not breathing that you will get like a fair amount of carbon dioxide tolerance training. But at the same time, yeah, there's kind of different ways that you can do that. What we do find as well is, a lot of it depends on the zone that you're in. Zone 2 versus zone 5, you'll obviously have a very different tolerance for how far you can go. So if you're doing a zone 2 training, then, really want to focus on, nose breathing only, versus zone 5. It's going to be very hard for you to maintain nose breathing throughout zone 5, right? When you're pushing that hard. So yeah, it also depends kind of where you're training, what you're trying to get out of. But what you'll find is by doing these exercises, you'll also be obviously adapting your heart rate because of that. Let's say take hold, for example. When you're doing a hold, you'll see your heart rate decrease, which obviously keeps you within like a certain zone. So you're able to expand the zone more in order to get the most benefits out of like a zone 2 in that example, than what you would do otherwise as well. So we're doing some testing on this at the moment, which is pretty exciting. But there hasn't really been much studies that look at breathwork for zone training. But there's just a very direct link to it that makes total sense. And one of our advisors, Dr. Jay Wiles, he trains many of the world's top athletes, and he's kind of looking at this very closely with us as well, to see kind of how can we really kind of bring in these elements to ensure that these type of athletes, or everyday athletes, can get the most out of that type of training.
Yeah, that's something I implemented myself about 10 years ago. When I was training, I stopped breathing through my mouth entirely. Even as I was like building up, I would start off like just trying to breathe through my nose in zone 1, like the easiest efforts, and then eventually through zone 2. And then I just kept building to the point where now I can do sprints. And granted, it can't be 30-second, 45-second sprints, but like 20-second, 25 seconds, I can still breathe through my nose entirely. And it's difficult, but it feels like it's a good challenge. And I'm sure it's building something internally. And there's someone else who popularized this like concept that like when you're able to keep breathing through your nose, you're able to keep some energy, some like sympathetic activation in the tank, so that when you need to use it for a burst, say in sports, to go the extra 20 yards or whatever, then you're able to activate it there. But like once you activate, you go into sympathetic, you deplete your energy, your reserves, a lot faster than you do if you're able to like maintain some level of parasympathetic activation even while exercising.
Yeah, we've heard and seen the same from studies that we've looked at as well. It's like it's used as like a that secret booster, which you're at a good level. Yeah, that's really good to be at that stage, and I'm not surprised it's taking you a while to get there. But that's like the holy grail where people should be aspiring to get to.
Yeah, and it's like a simple thing to start. Like in your next workout, try and breathe through your nose when possible. If you need to open your mouth and breathe through that, it's fine. I see people like taping their mouth closed with like actual physical tape, and that might work, but like I don't see, you don't really need to do that if you're just like aware of the fact that you're breathing through your nose. And then like, I don't know if it's safe, but it seems like if you need to, you could always rip the tape off. But that's something I've seen people doing at the gym also.
Yeah, we've seen it. And again, athletes, do that. I agree with you. I think if you're aware enough, you should be able to, control that. But, sometimes it could be kind of psychological for them as well, right? So get those benefits. But, and we haven't spoken about mouth taping at night, because obviously, that obviously leads, hand in hand to being able to do some of what you're doing as well, just kind of getting yourself in that rhythm at nighttime of just breathing through the nose. So that in the day kind of it becomes like a second nature as well, which, we often see that's kind of hugely influential as well in how fast people can progress as well.
Yeah. And that's something that I've been doing since I read, I think it was Breathe, way back when also, of mouth taping, very long time at this point. And there's also a misconception that you need to actually physically tape over your entire mouth so not no air at all can get through. But a lot of the benefit comes from physically manipulating the airway, opening the airway and changing the alignment of the mouth and jaw and everything. And so I found that these days when I do it, I just use a little strip of vertical tape instead of horizontal going across the entire mouth, and it works fine. And if I need to, in an emergency, I have a stuffy nose or something, I can still breathe through my mouth if I need to. But it's a reminder, and also it really reduces my propensity to breathe through my mouth.
Yeah, totally. I similar. I use just kind of a micropore tape and just like a little kind of a slot in the middle, which works incredibly well. I'm actually now debating to give that to my children or not. And my son's turned 7. He asks me all the time to start a mouth tape at night. And obviously there's a lot of benefits that come from bringing this in at a young age, right? From a facial structure, from a dental structure, but more importantly, from a kind of immunity perspective as well, and ensuring that your children are learning how to breathe effectively to manage kind of future kind of stress and building up their stress tolerances. But what's amazing is kind of the physical changes that can happen from a mouth breathing at a young age versus nose breathing at a young age. And again, this has all been kind of well documented, but something that I'm now at this time. I was always kind of waiting for the right moment. It feels like now he's 7. I think kind of is ready for it. But I think it's also important that there are different mouth tapes out there that you can do. Where so Patrick McKeown, our advisor, so he's released one called MyoTape, which is kind of a child-friendly one. So it actually tapes around the mouth. So it looks a bit weird, but it kind of closes the mouth so they can still open the mouth if you need to, and they've got adult versions as well. I don't use that, but I think for my son, that's probably what I would use just to kind of get him going and get him more familiar.
Okay, yeah. You mentioned several things there. You mentioned that it impacts facial structure and immunity. Let's go into that, because I think people might have heard how this can influence stress, now perhaps performance. What are the other things that fixing breathing can do?
Yes. Yeah, so if we kind of look at, and as you mentioned, your autonomic nervous system, so your sympathetic versus your parasympathetic. Now, we know that a little stress, a little sympathetic activation isn't a bad thing, but it only isn't a bad thing if you know how to downregulate and get to that parasympathetic state. So that's kind of incredibly important for people to remember. Firstly, it's not about always being in parasympathetic, it's the balance of everything. Now, by having that variability between them and being able to activate your parasympathetic, that obviously gives you a whole host of benefits from the effects of what otherwise, if you're living in a state of stress and anxiety, would cause in your body, and the chronic stress conditions that come off the back of that. And there are many that come off the back of it. So if you know from a young age how to control that, because your body doesn't know. If you're stressed out, your body doesn't know if it's kind of living something or you're thinking something, right? You're just acting in a certain way. So really important to be aware of that, and you're breathing a certain way. You're not getting the physiological damage that comes from a stressed body. So you can still have kind of thoughts and all those things, but you're telling your body it's okay, to breathe like that. You're safe, and all these things that just allow you to, not get those negative effects. So that obviously kind of goes into the world of immunity, which there's a whole host of things. That's just one aspect. Then you've got the other aspect, which is, how activating your sympathetic could fight off, certain viruses and conditions. And this is where things like Wim Hof, come into it, where, I'm sure that everyone's very familiar with Wim Hof. But how when he got injected with E. coli and was done his breathwork techniques and kind of got rid of it, and they thought he was a medical phenomenon, and Then he was like, not at all. Let me train like another dozen people on how to do what I did, and I'll show you exactly the same thing. And all of them obviously kind of repelled these E. coli in that instance, but of many other things they tested against as well. So breathwork can be used for different things. And so essentially, if you're using it as a tool to balance your autonomic nervous system to be more balanced and more, so less affected by stress, that is one thing. But also if and Andrew Huberman talks about this as well, where if he has a cold coming on or not feeling quite right, he'll do certain breathing techniques that activate the sympathetic to get your body to kind of fight it off. And then you've got other forms as well, which is just kind of the efficiency of breathing. So, lung capacity, for example, and just respiratory efficiency. And that comes from, your diaphragm as well. How well are you breathing? And that obviously has a whole host of benefits from an immunity perspective. So, yeah, there is a lot of stuff that comes from the benefits of breathing in a certain way, but also knowing how to breathe in a certain instance is obviously beneficial as well. But for the beginner, if that's kind of what they're looking for, it's more about the awareness of how are you breathing at any moment in time? Are you breathing through the nose versus the mouth? Are you breathing from your diaphragm versus upper chest? Are you breathing short, shallow, or long, kind of slow and deep? So that awareness is always the first thing, just to kind of make sure that people know of. And if they know that, then that's kind of the step one of kind of getting to a healthier version of themselves.
Yeah. The stress hormones like cortisol are interesting because they are like immunosuppressive over the long term when there's chronic stress, but acutely in the short term, it has the opposite effect, and it actually can bolster your immune system and help fight things. So it's like, that could be a useful tool. And I wonder, maybe you know this, but would Wim Hof use anything to activate his parasympathetic? Because I know a lot of his practices, his breathing and his proclivity to take long baths in ice would obviously engage the sympathetic, but then would he do anything to counteract that?
I don't know. I don't actually know, but you would think that, just trying to put two and two together here, obviously when they're doing an ice bath, he's not breathing the sympathetic state in the ice bath, right? When you get in the ice bath, you activate parasympathetic. So it's all about the activation of your sympathetic before hitting the ice. And then when you're in the ice, you have to just tell your body, just relax, and you breathe kind of very slowly. So when I do ice baths every day as well. So when I'm in an ice bath, I'll just generally do 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out perhaps, or something along those lines. So I'm forcing my body to activate the parasympathetic. And after 5 seconds, I'm not feeling anything. So you can really kind of make sure and always exhale as you go into the ice bath as well. Don't breathe in as you go in. So you want to activate your parasympathetic as you're going in. So automatically you're getting into the state straight away. Otherwise people go in, and then they're like trying to work on their breath, and it's just not a good look.
Yeah, it's not a good look, and it's also dangerous to like hyperventilate beforehand and then like continue doing that while you're in there. And that's where people run into trouble when they combine the two, water plus the Wim Hof, especially if they're not like supervised, they haven't done it before. Like people have died from that combination.
Yeah, it's a dangerous thing to play with, which is why, the parasympathetic when you're in the water is like what you have to do in that moment.
And then for kids, you mentioned facial structure, like breathing affecting facial structure. How does that work?
Yeah, so it starts with dental. So what we kind of found is that in this research is that when you breathe your mouth open, you'll have kind of a longer face essentially. And what a lot of the time, a lot of the dental structures is what is indicative of your facial structure in the future. So if you're with your mouth open, then you're going to have kind of this your dental structure will be more narrow, in which case your lower face will be more narrow. But it then also goes kind of through kind of to the nose as well. So if let's say you sleep with your mouth kind of taped or closed, then your tongue is resting at the roof of the palate. So your nose is actually like the roof of your mouth is the back of your nose. So what we kind of want to make sure is there's not, and this is kind of what can collapse over time if you're a mouth breather. So if you're also breathing as you should, mouth closed, tongue at roof of mouth, then you're also essentially changing the facial structure of your nose from your mouth. So there's a kind of this restful state of how we should be. Now, what we're finding is, and there's a good way of testing this is, so when you look at your tongue, I won't do it live on camera. When you look at your tongue, are you seeing teeth marks on the side of your tongue? That's quite indicative of, how you're breathing. Are your teeth kind of right? Because realistically, that shouldn't really be happening. There's a lot of stuff that influences, your facial structure, but it all kind of like starts from kind of, your mouth.
Mm-hmm. Does it make a difference if you have your tongue on the roof of your mouth or the floor, the bottom, when you're doing breath work?
Good question. I'm just doing it to see if there's a difference as well. I've not seen anything written, but in terms of our training, it's always top of mouth, and that's what we would always advise. I think what will happen is, I'm trying to do it now, but if you put it at the bottom, you actually I can feel it, right? My throat is kind of going backwards, so my airways is less clear when I'm doing that, and that also would be, what could cause snoring and things like that. So. Yeah, not that I've kind of seen anything written, just my training on this is always to kind of rest it kind of top of the mouth is where it should be.
Yeah, I used to hear it was the opposite. And then maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I learned that it should be on the roof of your mouth. And in fact, like some of the exercise scientists who are really good will actually say that when you're doing weight training, say you're doing heavy squats or something, the position of your tongue actually makes a difference in the whole kinetic chain. And like if you have your tongue on the floor of your mouth, you're going to have more potential issues and higher injury risk. I don't know by how much compared to putting it on the roof of your mouth.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard of that before, but yeah, super interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, we've covered a lot so far. What are some of the common misconceptions people have around breathing and breath work?
I think the general perception is breath work is woo-woo. It is spiritual. You have to kind of be doing a sound bath when you're doing it, and the truth is everything but that, and I think there's these two worlds. You've got traditional breath work, which maybe sits in that field, and then you've got functional breath work. So we are a functional breath work company, right? So that's all we focus on. But educating people on that is obviously something that, takes time as well, to realize there's this whole world of functional breath work that is used by athletes and longevity experts that people don't know about. It's not quite what they thought it was. So we have found that there is kind of this educational piece that goes hand in hand with what we're doing, because, a lot of these, the breathwork techniques kind of that exist are in meditation apps, which are very specific to a certain type of breathing. But yeah, I think that's the biggest misconception. And the other one is, like that if you spoke to someone, an older generation, they would say, I've been breathing all my life. Of course I know how to breathe. Everyone thinks they know how to breathe, but actually, obviously they don't, right? The vast majority of us are breathing dysfunctionally every day, which is what's causing so many illnesses off the back of it. So that's another, conception, which is that I know how to breathe because I'm living. It's ridiculous, but that's what people think, So I think there is this education. Don't get me wrong, I think generationally, there is this education now that happens naturally, in a younger audience, but there are people that breathwork is scary and they don't really understand, and, they think it's just kind of like breathing, but they breathe anyway. So I think that's the other one that I've come across a few times. I try not to overly engage with those types of conversations, but it comes up from time to time.
Yeah, well, it's one of the fastest ways we can shift the state of our nervous system too. It's within 60, 90 seconds, most people can feel a difference from an intense form of breath work.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the fastest way to hack your nervous system, right? So we know that if in this moment, let's just say I'm okay, really stressed, breathe out and hold your breath. Straight away, there is a physiological and biological effect that is happening in that moment straight away, right? And that's with anyone. And even with I have a 4-year-old as well, and he, that the part of the brain that manages kind of the emotional side of things hasn't actually even developed yet in a 4-year-old, right? So how can I kind of get him to really think when he's upset about something? You can breathe in that moment, just take even just a deep breath, breathe in, breathe out, in through your nose, or a big sigh through the mouth, and in that moment straight away, he's regulated, right? So it's a really powerful thing, which is why I'm so passionate about, making sure that we can get this into schools as well eventually in the future, because it is the fastest way that you can kind of manage things. And, you mentioned before about, recovery, kind of using meditation to recover, and people do, but it's actually unless you're doing visualization, which is something obviously quite different, it's actually how you're breathing in that meditation, which is what's causing the recovery. And it's super interesting because a lot of people don't know this, but good breathwork is the gateway to all of these aspects. And meditation is one of them, but the other part is also music. So Andrew Huberman spoke about this study where there was music that was often thought to have like a neurological effect that created a physiological effect. And actually what was happening was the physiological effect that was coming was actually from listening to slow music versus fast music and how they were breathing to that music. So obviously, if you listen to a slow music, classical, whatever it may be, or ambient music, you're breathing more slowly and you're therefore getting a certain effect. If you listen to rock music, fast music, then you're obviously going to be breathing faster and getting a certain effect. So there's this kind of unknown, which is obviously why we're really pushing this out there and why I'm doing podcasts like this, to really educate people that breathwork is the gateway to so much if you just know how to use it.
Yeah, it's a hidden factor. It's like, as you're mentioning, if you listen to something that's 120 beats per minute music, then it's going to entrain your heart rate up towards that 120 beats per minute from your resting heart rate of, say, 70 beats per minute, versus something slow and melodic that's going to have the opposite effect, which is why you see and you hear in gyms like intense rock and like metal and stuff like that. You don't hear classical piano for a very obvious reason. People like, they intuitively know that, and that they chase what they think is going to help them excel at whatever the task is.
Absolutely. And actually, like, the funny thing is actually kind of the opposite, right? Because yes, you want to be energized, but if you're breathing too quickly, you are not going to be performing at your best. So when people are listening to this music, they're just trying to get pumped, but actually, questionable if that's actually getting them the results that they want as well. But obviously, you can't go to the extreme and listen to like sleep music, because you'll be falling asleep on a bench press. But there's obviously kind of things that, to consider to kind of, again, it all comes down to awareness, right? When you are listening to certain music that's getting you pumped, maybe kind of listen to like that to kind of get you there and then kind of come into your zone. Or if it's, kind of listen to that music, but being aware of your breath at the time of listening to that music. So a whole host of things to consider.
Yeah, that's in my own training. What I'll do is I'll listen to like just some normal music for the majority of it, or a podcast or something. And then around my hardest sets, I will strategically change the music, kind of like what I was doing consciously with my breathing during workouts. I'll change the music to entrain like whatever I need to get that extra last couple of reps that I'm chasing on the, say, bench press, as you mentioned. But then I'll go back afterward and I'll down-regulate myself with a different music or audiobook or podcast choice.
Good move.
Yeah, and then something people don't even think about really, like, is the whole role of breathing and breath work in like athletic performance. Like when I was learning about like holistic training and integrated movement science, the breathing patterns are on the very top of the totem pole. And if you have those, if you haven't paid attention to those, you haven't fixed your breathing pattern, then you start adding on things that tax the core and they require core stability, but you don't have your breathing patterns down right, you're setting yourself up for a massively increased risk of injury down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very much linked to a diaphragm. So if people are activating the diaphragm, utilizing the diaphragm correctly, you would get, better balance, less risk of injury. And if it's essentially core stability, right? So that's not just affecting kind of, your front, but it's affecting your spine and everything that is supporting, above that point. So yeah, that is incredibly important, especially for like runners, endurance athletes, that they are training their diaphragm like a muscle, because it is a huge muscle that is most of the time not utilized properly,
And then also certain activities and lifestyle things and sports actually train the wrong breathing patterns. Bikram yoga teaches inverted breathing. I'm not sure why, if it's intentional, but I'm like looking at it like you're literally teaching people the exact opposite of what they should be doing to like regulate their nervous systems.
Yeah, it's funny because Patrick McKeown, He's written, I think, like 13 or 14 books just on breathwork now. And the one before last, I think it was released last year, he teamed up with a yoga expert. And basically, they want to rewrite how people are breathing during yoga. Because actually what they're saying is yoga never used to be like that. So the breath work, it evolved over time. And they're now like rewriting the playbook. I haven't read that book yet, but it's on my list to get to. But it specifically addresses exactly what you're talking about.
I know, because before I learned about breath work, I went to a bunch of Bikram yoga classes, and they taught us how to breathe. And I made sure I was following their instruction to a T throughout the entire class. And then I later realized that, how did I develop this like inverted breathing pattern? It was because of the yoga classes that I went to for a little while.
Yeah. It's it kind of changes over time, right? I'm going to read the book soon. It's next on my list, so I'll definitely kind of share my views off the back of that.
And then also, let's go explore your platform a little bit while we still have a few minutes left. I want to understand like where you guys are going and like how this differs, because there's a lot of different breathwork apps and practices out there. And from when I've explored some of your classes, the quality is certainly like a couple notches above most. It actually feels almost like a class that I'm physically there, a part of. And I love that you guys are integrating data into the whole process. Walk me through your backstory. Like, why did you decide that you needed to enter this already seemingly crowded market?
Yeah, I think for me, I discovered breathwork more from like a stress and focus perspective. And then when I studied, I saw this whole world of performance, and it really, really grabbed me. And then I started to explore some tools that existed out there. And, even a flooded marketplace doesn't mean, there's kind of the best products out there. So I kind of like played with a few and saw the Circle getting bigger in-house, Circle getting a smaller XL. And I was like, there's so much more to this, right? We know that if you're not kind of in the right posture for a breathwork session, you will not see the right benefits of it. So how can you look at someone? How can you get guidance? How can you get the most out of it? How can you get reminders? How can you be pushed in a class? So the first thing was just getting great coaches that can actually guide you through everything. And then it was about how can we bring in this world of data to ensure that everything that we're doing is measurable. And wellness should not just be a feeling anymore, right? We've got the ability to measure the data and see that data. So how can we bring in, wearable data, and you can see exactly the effect that a class is having on you. So in that kind of first instance of when you do a class, you connect to your wearable and you can track your heart rate live. And heart rate is a really key indicator of, your autonomic nervous system. And then off the back of a class, we have AI coach feedback that says, what worked well, what didn't work well, what you need to improve on for your next class, based off those biometrics. How are you breathing compared to what the instructor is telling you to. So that for me was something that was really important, to get that guidance, get that data, and get that measurability that what I was doing was worth my time. I can see it's working rather than just these feelings. And then when you kind of move forward, what does that look like? For us, there's this kind of hyper personalization aspect. How can we, ensure that we are giving you the best class at any moment in time based off your data? And that could be, based off your goals of, wanting to run a marathon and training and building lung capacity and, certain tolerances and all these things, versus just kind of getting to sleep better or living kind of a healthier, happier life, whatever you're looking to do. And so, we'll kind of put you in a direction based off your biometrics, but also based on where you want to be, based off those goals that you're obviously setting. And for me, it was, I wanted to have a data-driven coach in my pocket at any moment in time. And that's kind of what we really focus on doing. And the other part is how can we ensure that, people can listen to kind of music in those classes that they love as well, and how can they ensure that the classes are more entertaining for them, rather than just kind of getting bored with the same type of genre of music again and again, which I became. So we wanted to make sure we have different genres for different people. Music is very selective. Everyone likes different things. So we have your ambient music, we have your pop music for certain kind of like treadmill style classes. We have kind of your more lo-fi music. So a real kind of mix of electronic chill as well, which I personally like, that can really kind of help elevate you and the outcome that you're trying to get. So for me, it was about guided coaches, more entertaining, more fun, and more measurability to ensure that what you were doing was right.
Yeah. I also like that for the people who care about the science, you have a sciencey bits section around each track. So you can look and see, okay, how is this working? Why is it working the way it is?
Yeah. And, we actually, we have removed classes that we've kind of taken before, and we didn't even put them in the app on our launch because we didn't feel there was enough science behind some of them. We are very science first, and there's a lot of kind of different techniques out there, and some have been tested, really, really well, and some of them are yet to be tested. For example, there was a lot coming out now about, the left nostril versus the right nostril, and how left nostril links to your right side of your brain, the hemisphere of your brain, and the right links to the left. Now, if I would have told someone, when we launched, just, we're going to do this whole session through your left nostril, and these are the reasons why, there wasn't really enough data to really kind of show them like why that was the case. And so everything, we look at study after study to make sure that what we're doing is the most effective thing to do in that moment. But now we've got that data, so that could be something we start to kind of bring in. So rather than doing like a left nostril session to really kind of activate the right hemisphere of the brain and, being kind of more kind of a relaxed state, and which is supposedly linked to your parasympathetic. Now, we will focus more on alternate nostril breathing. So you're balancing out both sides of your brain. So as the science evolves, and there's a lot of studies that are coming out now, our techniques are also evolving. Which is also really important because there's so much going into breathwork now that it was kind of like, it was all about meditation like 5 years ago, but now it's all about breathwork. So yeah, great to see that's coming through, and our classes and techniques are obviously evolving as the industry evolves as well.
Yeah, it's cool to see too that a lot of the wisdom and teachings of the ancient systems like Ayurveda, where breathwork really originated, are now being validated by the latest Western modern science.
Totally, yeah. It's coming this cycle. I mean, it's kind of a shame that it was, lost for so long. But there were, and it's kind of been on the, it's been known about for so long, and you have to know the right people to get the right training. Now, like for me, it was a case of like, well, yeah, these athletes, have these teams of coaches. They have their own breathwork coach, right? Most of these athletes, but your average everyday person, like they don't have access to that. So how can we create a tool that actually gives them all the content and the know-how, and makes it specific and hyper personalized for them as an individual, as if they had their own personal breathwork coach. So that for me was all kind of really important.
It did feel like that in the sessions I've done. And I think the biggest barrier most people have to this, they'll listen to a podcast like this. They'll be like, okay, it sounds great. I can see the value or the importance of adding this into my routine. And then it comes time to actually do it. It's like, do I want to spend 5 to 20 minutes sitting there, just breathing in and out, and maybe notice a difference, maybe not? And I know personally that's been a barrier for me, but then your classes do make it a lot more engaging and fun, and almost feel like an actual class in person. And perhaps if I was to get some friends together and all be gathered around the phone, it would make it actually feel like an in-person class. But this is like the next closest thing I've come across so far.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that because, that is something we're kind of looking to do in the future as well. And, we have a lot of people, like couples, that are using the app and just plugging it to their TV, and by saying that, it is not built for TV integration. So it doesn't look as it should and everything else. So I want to caveat it, but I know people are doing it, so I'm going to say it. Eventually, we'll create like a purposeful televised version that allows people to just seamlessly kind of attach it to their TV and get the full benefits and see their kind of their scores in real time. But up until now, it's great to hear that there is this kind of community, this hidden community aspect. That people are doing breathwork together, and it's bringing people closer as well. And it's not something that was intentional coming into this, but it's something that is a really amazing outcome that's come off the back of it, which is really amazing to see.
Yeah, the social leaderboards gamification is also cool. I don't think you have that in your platform yet, but at some point it'd be nice to see that, because seeing that your friends just completed their 5-minute daily session is a little bit of extra motivation to complete it myself.
Yes. So I can't say too much, but yeah, we've got like a really cool version of that, like in the roadmap. Essentially, what we can do is one step better, right? Because we can measure how you performed. So that takes it to a whole new level when it comes to sharing with your mates, right? So yeah, there is something there that is kind of in the works, which I'm very excited about as well.
Beautiful. Well, if people have made it this far, they're probably curious about where they can find this. We referenced the name several times throughout, especially more towards the beginning. How do people find your app, connect with you, and go from there?
Sure. Yeah. So we're in the US only at the moment. So we're in the iOS, and it's iOS only at the moment as well. So you can find us in the App Store, FivePointFive, all spelled in words. You can follow us on Instagram _5.5 as well. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So people can just add me on LinkedIn as well, if they kind of want to chat as well. But in terms of coming into the community, we have like a team that's incredibly responsive, to really supporting people on their own journeys. And there's a lot of emails that come through, and some of them I personally respond to if they get to a certain level of kind of, technical questioning, that people really want to know what to do in certain situations. So I had a kind of a very big influencer, reach out to me today, and they've got they've got a medical condition, which is quite rare, but they're running a marathon. And so for them, there are nuances involved in their condition and how to get that. So we just want to make sure we're supporting everyone to the best of our ability. There's kind of a really nice kind of support function in the app, so people can ask questions at any time if they just want kind of some more guidance or direction on things as well. Because we appreciate that, obviously you know your stuff, but the majority of people will be coming in and being like a beginner or a beginner plus. But if you are kind of a frequent breath worker, we do have advanced sessions as well. So 4 levels, beginner plus, intermediate or advanced. So depending on what you select in your onboarding journey is where we'll start to kind of push certain types of classes to you.
Perfect. Do we set up something for high performance longevity listeners to get a taste of what this is?
We haven't yet, but we will. So if you announce the code, and we'll ensure we build it.
Sure. Let's do urban then.
Urban. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So what we can do for your listeners is give them an exclusive 7-day trial to try it and see for themselves. Typically, we do a 3-day trial, so just give them the opportunity to try it for longer than kind of your standard user.
Awesome. And they can get the full 5 days of 5 minutes per day and that way too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Adam, before we part ways, what is a controversial take you have around breathing?
I think there is going to be a lot more data coming out of the link between people that do breath work and some of the biggest conditions that people can suffer from. And I feel that this is kind of the start of it. And there is obviously kind of there's a logic there, right? Which is certain conditions are developed when you're living in a certain state of kind of stress, and that we spoke about the physiological effect that has on your body and what that causes, the chemical reaction that causes, and what damages that does, and what that can cause in the long term. And I think there is going to be some stuff that kind of gives a bit more kind of concrete aspects to bringing in breath work into kind of people's lives that want to try and ensure that they are just living healthier and don't get down that road, or maybe even people that are already kind of find themselves with certain conditions and want to try and turn that around.
Awesome. I'm excited to see that unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Adam. It's been a blast chatting with you, talking all things breathwork and what you're building at 5.5. And I look forward to seeing some of those updates, connecting my wearables. And as soon as you guys support Ultra Human Ring, that will also be great.
Yeah, well, we do support it on the heart rate tracker at the moment, but we just don't support it. So there's 2 sections I should add real quickly, sorry. The heart rate tracker integratable into kind of all major wearables apart from Aura right now. But the performance section, which is like a mind, body and sleep score, that's under beta right now. So that's only integrating with Apple Watch for the time being. But in the next kind of 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to be bringing in other wearables into that as well. But you can still kind of get kind of all the kind of good stuff from those types of wearables as well.
Okay. Well, look forward to checking that out. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to High Performance Longevity. If you got value today, the best way to support the show is to leave a review or share it with someone who's ready to upgrade their health span.
You can find all the episodes, show notes, and resources mentioned at outlier.com. Until next time, stay energized, stay bioharmonized, and be an outlier.